Mark, your artisan approach is a dinosaur. We need mass appeal fast, you're done. That was Alexis Crane, the new CEO. I'm Mark Stevens. For 22 years, I was head brewer at Summit Creek Brewery. Started when old Arthur Beck was still just sketching out hop additions on bar napkins. We built Summit Creek from a local taproom to a regional powerhouse, winning more JBEF medals for our West Coast IPA than I can count. My philosophy was simple quality ingredients, meticulous process, and respect for the beer. By last year, my brews accounted for 70% of Summit Creek's profit. Not that anyone in the new Chrome and Glass executive wing paid attention until their quarterly numbers dipped. Alexis blew in 6 months ago like a data-driven tornado, fresh off some disruptive tech IPO. She talked about scalable beverage solutions and flavor profile optimization via AI. Never brewed a batch in her life, but the board, mostly venture capital guys now, ate up her buzzwords. I just kept my head down, kept the fermenters bubbling, kept the quality high. But I saw the way she looked at my handwritten brew logs, the skepticism when I talked about the nuances of specific hop varietals from small farms in Yakima Valley. I was the old guard, the guy who still tasted every batch before it went to bright. The email landed on a Tuesday. Mandatory strategy alignment meeting 2 p.m. Boardroom. Her assistant, a nervous kid named Kevin, probably wasn't even old enough to legally drink what I brewed. The boardroom was all whiteboards and smart screens now. Alexis, Kevin, and a woman I didn't recognize from HR. I knew, Mark. Alexis started, a pre-rehearsed smile that didn't reach her eyes. Summit Creek is incredibly grateful for your foundational contributions. Foundational. Like I was an old cornerstone to be admired but built over. She droned on about agility, market responsiveness, a new dynamic portfolio strategy. The HR woman slid a thick envelope across the polished table. I didn't open it. I thanked them, stood up, and walked out. 22 years, done in 20 minutes? No shouting, no pleading. Just a cold, clean cut. What Alexis and her spreadsheets didn't get was that real craft beer wasn't just a product. It was a community, a story. The distributors, the pub owners, the regulars, they didn't just buy our beer. They bought into what Summit Creek was, or what it used to be. I cleared out my small office while most of the brewery staff were at their afternoon shift change. A few well-worn brewing textbooks, a couple of faded photos with Arthur, my lucky mash paddle. No grand farewells. But as I walked to my truck, my phone buzzed. David Miller, owner of Miller's Draught House, our biggest single account, he'd heard. Fast. I started at Summit Creek when Arthur Beck was running it out of a converted garage. He'd just bought a second-hand 7-barrel system. Mark, he'd said, we're not making widgets. We're making something people will celebrate with, mourn with, or just enjoy on a quiet evening. Never forget that. We didn't have MBAs or marketing departments. We had passion and a belief in good beer. I'd driven to every hop farm, every maltster in a 3-state radius, building relationships that lasted decades. I knew their families, their struggles. We grew Summit Creek one perfect punt at a time. When Arthur retired 10 years ago, his son, Daniel, took over. Daniel understood the soul of the place, even if he was more numbers focused. He let me run the brewhouse my way. But Daniel sold a majority stake to a private equity firm 3 years back. To fuel growth, they said. That's when the slide began. Whispers about efficiency and broader appeal, meetings where terms like synergy and leveraging assets replaced talk of work gravity and yeast health. Sarah Chen, my sharp assistant brewer whom I'd mentored for 5 years, saw it coming. They're asking about simplifying the dry hopping schedule on the flagship IPA. She'd told me a month before Alexis arrived. Said it would save 2 days in the tank and cut hop costs by 15%. I'd fought it, of course. That dry hopping schedule was the IPA. The day after Alexis axed me, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. 23 missed calls, 40-odd texts, all from people in the industry, hop suppliers, other brewers, distributors. I hadn't even told my wife Karen yet. She was visiting her sister. I needed to wrap my own head around it. David Miller called again. What in God's name are they thinking, Mark? New direction, David. Streamlining. I repeated the corporate garbage. Streamlining you out the door? You are Summit Creek to half the bars in this state. I didn't have an answer. That new sales rep of theirs, fresh out of college, tried to sell me on some new hard seltzer extension line they're launching. David snorted. Asked him about the fall seasonal, the porter you've been perfecting for a decade. He looked at me like I had two heads. Awareness settled over me. They'll figure it out, David. No, they won't, he said, his voice grim. People like that, they don't learn the business, they just try to force it into their pre-made boxes. After we hung up, I finally opened the severance package. 6 months pay, Kubra for 3, a non-disparagement clause, standard, and a non-compete. It basically said I couldn't work in a brewing capacity for any brewery, or consult for any brewery, in a 5-state radius for 2 years. 2 years. They were trying to shelve me. My phone lit up again. Carol from Yakima Chief Hops. Heard the news, Mark. Their loss. When you decide what's next, our best lots are yours. But dinner time, I'd spoken to 6 major distributors and 3 key ingredient suppliers. They all said the same thing: their loyalty was to the quality I guaranteed, not the Summit Creek logo. I sat on my back porch, nursing a bourbon, an idea starting to form. Alexis and her board saw my experience as a liability, my methods as archaic. But what if those archaic methods, those deep-rooted relationships, were exactly what the market craved, especially now with Summit Creek about to flood it with generic, cost-cut swill? I called Emily Carter, a lawyer who'd helped Arthur with some trademark stuff years ago. Smart, no nonsense. Emily, I got fired, and they slapped me with a pretty tight non-compete. Can you look at it? Summit Creek finally pushed you out. She sounded unsurprised. Send it over, Mark. Might be the best damn thing that ever happened to you. I wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted to keep making good beer, helping others make good beer. If Summit Creek didn't want that, maybe others did. That night, I actually slept. 2 weeks later, I was in Emily's office. She tossed the non-compete onto her desk. It's aggressive, overly broad, and probably unenforceable as written, especially given your tenure and specialization, she said. The consulting part is particularly weak. They can't stop you from using your general knowledge and skills. So I could start my own consultancy, advise smaller breweries. You could, Emily confirmed, but expect a fight. Summit Creek will sue even if they know they'll lose. They'll try to bleed you dry with legal fees to make an example. Deep pockets. Alexis would use them. What if, I mused, I don't approach anyone they currently define as a competitor? What if I just make myself available to those who need help and aren't on their radar? Emily smiled. Now you're thinking like a lawyer, Mark. That's a very different proposition. The next day, I registered Mark Stevens Brewing Solutions. No fancy logo, no website yet. Just a business license. 3 days after that, David Miller called. Heard you're your own man now, Mark. News gets around? Like yeast in a warm fermenter. Listen, my cousin runs a small brewery up in Clear Lake. Good kid, struggling with consistency. Summit Creek's new rep tried to sell him seltzer too. He needs real advice. No conflict with your old bosses. Just helping a little guy out. I'm just getting set up, David. 10 grand for a 2-month review and process fix. He's desperate. It was more than fair, and it felt right. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. His Pilsner tastes like disappointment. After David's call, Sarah Chen, my former assistant brewer, called. Mark, can we meet? Somewhere off the radar. We met at a small diner way out on Highway 40. Sarah looked stressed. It's a disaster? Mark, she said, stirring her coffee endlessly. They put me in charge of your old recipes, but the new ops manager, some guy from a soda bottling plant, keeps overriding my ingredient specs. Cost synergies, he calls it. The flagship IPA taste is thin. 3 of the senior seller guys quit last week. Not surprised. You don't get it. They're changing everything. They're running test batches of coffee, flavored lager and a blueberry, acai wheat beer. And they're blaming the old brewing team, meaning you, for lack of innovation when the sales guys can't move this new crap. She paused. And legal had a meeting about you. They're convinced you're going to start poaching their distributors. Now I understood her nerves. She was risking her job. Thanks, Sarah, for the heads up. She slid a plain envelope across the vinyl tabletop. Updated contact list for all the key regional distributors. Personal cell numbers. I didn't give you this. We never met. She got up and left. I looked at the envelope. Using it would be walking right into their trap. Alexis would sick her lawyers on me so fast my head would spin. They've wanted me to make a traditional competitive move, so I had to do something else. I left the envelope on the table. A month drifted by. I took on a few small consulting gigs, a family-owned brewpub struggling with off flavors, a startup needing help scaling recipes. Nothing that would poke the Summit Creek bear directly. Kept me busy, paid some bills. The non-compete loomed, but Emily's words gave me a measure of confidence. Then, an email from an unfamiliar address. Harold Vance, chairman of Summit Creek's board he wanted to meet. At his golf club, not the brewery. Curiosity got the better of me. The Fairway Hills Country Club was exactly what you'd expect. Old money, hushed tones. Harold, late 60s. Immaculate blazer, waited in a private dining room. 2 glasses of iced tea sat on the table. Mark, appreciate you coming. Harold. He gestured to a chair. Things at Summit Creek are challenging. I sipped my tea. Said nothing. Revenue for the last quarter is down nearly 40%. Harold said, looking out at the perfectly manicured 18th green. Our core brands, the ones you developed, are seeing significant drops in volume. The new product lines haven't gained traction. That's a shame. My voice was neutral. Harold turned back. You don't seem shocked. Beer is a personal business. Harold always was. Evidently, he leaned in. The board is re-evaluating Alexis Crane's strategy. Her disruptions might be better suited to another industry. Why tell me? Who wants you to come back, Mark? As chief brewing officer, above Alexis, full autonomy over brewing operations and product development. I just stared. What about Sarah Chen? I asked. She knows my methods. Sarah's a good brewer, but she doesn't have your name, your relationships. And Alexis. Harold's smile was thin. She'll understand the new corporate structure. It clicked. This wasn't just about sales numbers. This isn't new, is it? You've had concerns about Alexis for a while. Harold sighed. Alexis was a bold hire. Some of us on the board were hesitant, but the private equity majority pushed her through. Daniel Beck, Arthur's son, argued against her appointment before he fully divested. Now, with the numbers tanking, even the PE guys are nervous. Your termination, Mark, was not a unanimous board decision. It was an Alexis decision, presented as a fait accompli. So Alexis hadn't just been implementing a new strategy, she'd been consolidating power, removing anyone tied to the old Summit Creek. My firing was a power play, not just a business decision. The offer is substantial? Harold pressed. Double your old salary. A significant equity stake. Carte blanche. It was tempting. Vindication. But they didn't want Mark Stevens, the brewer. They wanted Mark Stevens, the quick fix, the guy who could make the bad numbers go away. They wanted me to be their cleanup crew and maybe, eventually, the one to push Alexis out. Not for quality, but for control. I need to think about this, I said. Of course. But the next quarterly report is in 6 weeks. The clock is ticking. Driving home, I knew. They hadn't learned a thing. They just wanted my Rolodex and my recipes. The anger I expected didn't come, just clarity. I emailed Harold the next morning. A polite decline. His reply was instant, offering even more money. I didn't respond. Instead, I made some calls. First to David Miller. David, remember that idea for helping your cousin? I'm thinking bigger. I'm listening. Not just one-off consulting. What if a bunch of smaller, independent breweries pooled resources, shared knowledge, maybe even bulk buy ingredients, negotiate better distribution collectively? An alliance, where quality and collaboration are the cornerstones. Silence. Then, Mark, are you trying to build a new Summit Creek, but better? No. Something different. No CEO, no board. Just brewers helping brewers. With me as the connector, the facilitator? David chuckled. You son of a gun. I'm in, and I know 5 breweries right now who'd jump at this. My next call was to Sarah Chen. How attached are you to coffee-flavored lagers, Sarah? She laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in months. When do I start? Then, to Emily Carter. The alliance idea, Emily. Does it dance around the non-compete? It pirouettes, Mark, she said. You're not working for a competitor. You're creating a support structure they choose to join. Different animal entirely. Within 2 weeks, the Independent Brewers Alliance had 6 founding members, all smaller breweries, frustrated with the big guys, hungry for expertise. Each paid a modest membership fee into a shared operational fund, enough to cover my time. Sarah's salary. I hired her immediately, and a small, no-frills office space in an industrial park, miles from Summit Creek's gleaming headquarters. We didn't advertise. We didn't poach. Word just spread. A brewery would improve its flagship beer after working with us. Another would solve a persistent contamination issue. A third would get access to a hop contract they could never have secured alone. Success stories trickled through the distributor networks, through the homebrew shops, at local beer festivals. By the end of month 2, we had 12 members. Month 3, 20. We had to hire another experienced brewer, a retiree who missed the smell of mash. Sarah called me one afternoon in November, about 3 months in. Wuss, who's on the phone? Harold Vance. Wants to know if Summit Creek can join the alliance. What did you tell him? I told him we'd discuss it at our next members meeting, but our model is really for independent craft breweries struggling to compete with, well, places like Summit Creek. I grinned. Perfect. The Q4 earnings report for Summit Creek was a bloodbath. Revenue down 60% year over year, stock for what was publicly traded in the toilet. Alexis Crane resigned to pursue other opportunities. The same day, I read about it in the trade paper, while Sarah and I were finalizing a joint marketing plan for 5 of our alliance members for the spring festival season. A week later, a different board member from Summit Creek called, a woman named Janice Riley, someone who'd known Arthur. Mark, she said, her voice tired, we're a mess. The PE firm wants out. We're thinking of restructuring, maybe even selling to the employees if we can find a way. Would you consider consulting with us, properly this time, to help us find our way back? Janice, I said, the alliance helps its members. If Summit Creek, under new ownership and a new philosophy, wants to apply for membership like anyone else, we can talk. There was a long pause. I understand. Arthur would have liked what you're building, Mark. I hung up and looked around our bustling, slightly chaotic office. Phones ringing, brewers arguing good-naturedly over yeast strains, the whiteboard covered in scrawled ideas for collaborative brews. This wasn't about revenge. It was about building something that valued what I valued, what Arthur had valued. It was about proving that quality, community, and passion weren't outdated concepts. They were the foundation. And sometimes you had to tear down your old house to build something stronger, something more true, on that same solid ground. Getting fired. Best damn thing that ever happened.